This LOS is describe sources, measurement, and sustainability of economic growth. Economic growth and sustainability. So first we're going to look at the sources of economic growth, and you can see here that there's 5 sources which add to the capacity to supply goods and services. So first is the labor supply. Increase the labor supply. Obviously you're going to increase the capacity to supply goods and services. 2, human capital. That's in terms of knowledge, skills, and ability. Increase the human capital and you will increase the capacity to supply goods and services, maybe better productivity. 3 is the physical capital. We're talking about plant, property, and equipment. If you make investments in plant, property, and equipment, you'll increase the capacity to supply goods and services. 4 is technology. Increase technology. Again, similar to increasing the human capital, increasing the technology, you're going to increase the productivity, and that will increase capacity to supply goods and services. And then finally is natural resources. Increasing natural resources, for example, new discoveries of gas or oil, is going to increase the capacity to supply goods and services. So in summary, 5 sources of economic growth: labor supply, human capital, physical capital, technology, and natural resources. Now that we've looked at the 5 sources of economic growth, we're going to look at measurement. So the production function indicates the relationship between output and inputs of technology, labor, and capital. So we have a production function here, y equals a times f lk, where y is the level of aggregate output, a is the technological knowledge, f indicates a functional relationship, L is the quantity of labor, and K is the capital stock, that is property, plant, and equipment, and land used to produce goods and services. We use the production function to link output in an economy to the inputs. A is the total factor productivity, which is the growth in output not attributable to K or L. The labor force is the portion of the working age population, that is above age 16, that is employed or available for work. Okay, that's important to note, that the labor force is also available for work, not necessarily employed. Human capital reflects the education, training, and life experience of the labor force. Labor productivity is the quantity of goods and services that a worker can produce in 1 hour of work. So again, we've got a measurement here. Labor productivity equals real GDP divided by aggregate hours. So labor productivity is affected by education and skill of workers, investments in physical capital, giving them better tools, and finally, improvements in technology. Sustainable growth is the rate of growth that is achievable given the resources, labor and capital. It depends on productivity and the size of the labor force. So here again we have another measurement. Potential growth rate of GDP, adjusted for inflation, equals the long-term growth rate of the labor force plus the long-term labor productivity growth rate. So for example, if the labor force of a nation is expected to grow at a rate of 4% per year, and the labor productivity is expected to grow at a rate of 1% per year, the expected rate of growth in potential GDP equals 4% plus 1% equals 5%. Okay, so we can derive the degree of slack in an economy by comparing actual growth in GDP with potential growth in GDP. So if actual growth is greater than potential growth, you've got inflationary pressures. If actual growth is less than potential growth, you've got resource slack and low inflationary pressure. A quick practice question to check our understanding. Which of the following can be measured directly? A, potential GDP, B, labor productivity, or C, total factor productivity? Okay, that's a nice little question. B is correct. Labor productivity can be directly measured as output per hour. So again, as I said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. There are some measurements, there's some formulas here, and one was labor productivity equals real GDP divided by aggregate hours, so you can definitely measure that one directly. Let's look at the total factor productivity. Recall from the formula y equals a times the function of L and K. A is the total factor productivity, but it's the growth in output not attributable to K and L, so we're not measuring that one directly. And with regards to the potential GDP, it cannot be measured directly. And one last practice question to finish this LOS. The sustainable growth rate is best estimated as A, the weighted average of capital and labor growth rates, B, growth in the labor force plus growth of labor productivity, or C, growth in total factor productivity plus growth in the capital to labor ratio. Again, that question shouldn't be too difficult because it's just asking for the sustainable growth rate. They're putting into words what the equation is. Recall from the earlier slide, the sustainable growth rate, the potential growth rate of GDP, adjusted for inflation, equals the long-term growth rate of the labor force plus the long-term labor productivity growth rate. So you can see that B is correct. Output growth is equal to the growth rate of labor force plus the growth rate of productivity, i.e. output per worker. Unlike total factor productivity, output per worker is observable, so this is the most practical way to approach the estimation of sustainable growth. And that's the last slide for this LOS. Thank you.